Welcome back, everybody, to the Vancouver Regional Championships. My name is Maeve Rourke. I am once again joined by Scott Glaza. And Scott, I finally just got to walk outside in the with the sunshine out. This is probably one of the prettiest cities I've ever been to.
Yeah, Vancouver's wonderful. I certainly recommend it to everyone. A little biased, living just a little bit south outside of Seattle, but yeah, it's a nice region up here. Now, which we haven't been able to see on the official stream for real, I guess, at all this year, other than maybe a little bit at the Oceania International Championships.
Actually, yeah, so now you guys can actually take a peek here. We're going to be showing our table 3. It is Collin Heier versus Abdullah Mohayyuddin, which is a really interesting name to pull up for Collin, right? Because Collin has had so much success, I think. He's done really, really well in multiple tournaments, had a great showing at OCIC, is going to be running something a little bit similar, right? He's got Iron Bundle, Tyranitar, Fluttermane, Great Tusk, Torkoal, and Talonflame. And that team does look pretty, it looks pretty similar to a lot of those big Great Tusk teams that we're seeing. But Abdullah is running a Pokemon team that is a bit of a blast from the past there with Lilligant and Torkoal.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Lilligant played to some serious success from Nick Devar, so it works. I think that's one thing that I guess we talked very briefly on about before, right? But it seems like over the course of the 2 months of this regulation set, players have done a good job of kind of finding ways to optimize getting as much value out of Torkoal as we can. This is kind of weird because, yeah, like you said, it's a bit of a throwback, right? There's not like a whole lot of photosynthesis happening. There's a decent amount,
yeah,
but yeah. I like to see it, right? It's a little different than the teams we've seen in these archetypes.
I think Abdullah's team is actually Nick's exact 6 from Knoxville, if I'm not mistaken. So pulling that same 6 Pokemon, which maybe Collin might have practiced against, right? Kind of those players tend to run in similar circles, probably play against each other. So Collin may have a little bit more experience in this matchup. Both of these trainers have Torkoal. It's not like you were really fighting for a lot of weather. Tyranitar may play a big role here, I think, if you're trying to prevent the opponent from having sun, but then do you want to have your own sun for your own, your Fluttermane or even your Great Tusk? So I think you have to balance the weather a little bit here.
Yeah, I'll be kind of interested to see exactly what Collin has. I've played a lot of games with the 5 non-Torkoal Pokemon on that team together, and I will say playing Tyranitar into Torkoal Lilligant in this format is not super fun.
It doesn't feel great.
Because you can't really lead Tyranitar, because with it always being faster than Torkoal, the Sand activates and then gets immediately replaced by Sun, and like switching in and out against that duo isn't super feasible. So even if you want the Sun to be off, you're forced to have it in the back. Switching into that is hard. It's kind of what Lilligant Torkoal does well as a duo. Lilligant has that chlorophyll ability, which makes it, in most normal situations, act first while the Sun is active with double speed. Sleep, not a super ideal thing. Sleep Powder's accuracy very high. If you don't get put to sleep, there's always the threat of the after you eruption, which most Pokemon don't take very well. Looking at Collin's team, there's not a whole lot of Pokemon that want to get by that. Certainly Tyranitar wouldn't really care. But the other 5, not exactly defensive stalwarts. I mean,
Iron Bundle is booster energy, right? So maybe if you can booster energy plus Icy Wind and everything, you'll be faster than the Lilligant with Chlorophyll, but then you're still facing down a Torkoal, who things get a little bit funky, right? This Iron Bundle is now one of the Encore ones, the one on Collin's team. It has the 3 pretty standard moves of Freeze Dry, Icy Wind, and Hydro Pump, so no Encore over Hydro Pump there. It's a really, Collin's team feels like kind of the 6 best Pokemon in the format kind of grouped together, right? It has that sort of feel to it where it's all these big Pokemon with big stats and lots of power output and a good amount of tech here too, right? Like Torkoal, this one is not one of the ones that's running Yawn, but it is running Helping Hand, which is really nice when you have a couple of big hitters on your side of the field as well.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of kind of the Torkoal innovations where, next to Lilligant, you kind of just have to use the old school Torkoal.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I'm going to start blasting, and we'll see if I can do enough. But I do like, it's getting played a little bit more like my old friend Politoed, right?
Yes.
Where it's not like the offensive focus of the team, but more just kind of enabling the other Pokemon. The thing on Collin's team that is super scary to me in this matchup, and kind of the reason why I might favor him going in, is the item on Talonflame, where he has the safety goggles, which makes it much, much, much better into this matchup than Talonflame would normally be. You do kind of, there's not a whole lot that the other that combo of Pokemon can do to stop the Tailwind, which is nice on in itself. But also not having to be able to, or not being able to be put to sleep is nice. Resisting like literally all of the attacks from those two. It's going to force a little more creativity from the other side of the field.
Yeah, it's that same Terra Ghost with Safety Goggles Talonflame that we saw actually just a couple of rounds ago on you and I's last match, which is something that it just is so tough to deal with at the start of a game. And if that's the way that you end up kind of leading, and you lead fast and strong and try and get damage off later, or even that Will-O-Wisp can definitely be a problem. But then the other Terra types, it is a Terra Ghost Iron Bundle, which is a Pokemon that is a Terra typing that I've seen kind of have a couple of different options. I've mostly seen Ice and Ghost. I've seen some Grass popping up. I think Ghost could be really, really nice here, especially, if Dragonite tries to come in and it's got the speed with something like an extreme speed. You can Terra Ghost, you won't take that damage. You can fire off a super effective Freeze Dry because the Dragonite is Terra Flying, so you could just hit it super effectively anyway. So then probably Dragonite doesn't even want to come to this match.
Yeah, I think it's a tough bring. One thing that'll be interesting too, I think there's still some incentive for Collin to bring the Tyranitar, just because it is pretty annoying for the majority of the Pokemon, I guess 4 of the Pokemon on the other side of the field to fight. But there is always the threat of getting that awkward Assault Vest Tyranitar versus Assault Vest King Gambit fight, which I think is enough King Gambit favored that it's worth avoiding it. Although, the King Gambit this team is a little bit different than what we see usually. It's the flying Terra that we see. One of the things that I have enjoyed seeing with the evolution of Torkoal teams is more players choosing to use the Fire Terra type on some offensive Pokemon, getting the boost from that Drought, which we do see here instead. Which I guess changes it in a way that makes it quite a bit better for Tyranitar than it normally is.
Yeah, I think actually something that's really interesting to note, both of the Great Tusks here are both Choice Scarf. And I think that might end up being a little bit funky when we get further into the match. It may end up kind of just depending on how those trainers individually trained their Pokemon. If one of them knows that they are not running at top speed on that Great Tusk, and they may be running it a little bit slower and invested some more into bulk to allow for that Choice Scarf to boost the speed. But, depending on what these trainers end up doing and what they end up wanting to, how they know that their Pokemon is trained, maybe they want to end up going to bring that Pokemon, or maybe they then know they need to prioritize something else. And I like Collin's choice of bringing the Pelipper, even though he does not have rain on his team.
Yeah, he enjoys weather, but not that one. Interesting pick. I like it. Yeah, it's it's a little deception up until the team sheet's delivered. I think probably more effective than the deception on the other side, since it seems pretty unlikely that Pokemon was going to be on his team. You
don't think a Sprigatito is going to be there, or a Thundurus?
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of Thundurus in this form, and I can't imagine why.
Well, maybe some. Who knows? But we have Thundurus at home, and Thundurus at home is like Roaring Moon or something.
Yeah, or like Kilowattrel. It's doing its best.
It's Kilowattrel. You're right. Thundurus at home is Kilowattrel. Looking at Collin's team, right, I'm just trying to look into how you end up trying to break through that King Gambit. I think Terrafire King Gambit feels really comfortable if you're able to maybe deal with some of the other big threats on the other side of the field. Iron Bundle would probably be tough, but if you don't go for the Terastallization and you have the Assault Vest, you're probably really safe into a lot of the Pokemon on the other side of the field. There is Low Kick as a tech move on that Tyranitar to get that 4x super effective damage onto King Gambit, which I think is a really neat move as well.
Yeah, I think if he chooses to bring the King Gambit, I think it's going to be tough not to dedicate the Terastallization to it, which will just kind of be something he has to plan for all game. I do think that the Choice Scarf makes it a little bit easier to play King Gambit. I think that, if you have to fully remove Great Tusk from the field before King Gambit can really do anything, it makes things a lot harder, where at least if you can get it to lock into something that isn't totally devastating, you can kind of get something done, maybe switch in and out.
Looks like our trainers here are going for their Game 1 leads. It is Dragonite and Great Tusk for Abdullah, and for Collin it is Talonflame and Fluttermane.
So the Dragonite coming out anyway. He's not scared, thinking you can find a way to weave Dragonite in and get some positive value.
Yeah, no way to fake out or stop this Talonflame this turn, though, to set up anything like a Tailwind, or even, go for something like a Taunt.
Yeah, so the Terra Ghost could matter here. One thing that is being threatened on that side of the field is an extreme speed into the Talonflame slide and then a Rock Slide, which would get the knockout on Talonflame before it's able to use Tailwind. One of the ways you can get around Gale Wing is extreme speed is higher priority, but he shows the threat of it and then doesn't wind up using it, switching out instead.
King Gambit is going to be the Pokemon that switches in here, revealing another Pokemon here on Abdullah's side of the field. Pokemon, though, that may be able to take some big, may be able to handle some big damage, but instead looks like we'll be seeing that Terastallization into the Ghost Terra typing on that Talonflame. Does not want to take any damage from something like that Extreme Speed, which, like you said, has a higher priority than those Gale Wings flying type moves like Tailwind. Probably going to see, though, another a Terrestrialization onto the Dragonite on Abdullah's side as well. That Dragonite is Terra Flying. It also carries Terra Blast, which is a really common moveset that we've seen on these Dragonite in Regulation B. Regulation A was a little bit more Terra Normal with Extreme Speed, so now things have kind of changed to a Terra Flying type. Talonflame, though, goes for a Tailwind, so no Extreme Speed this turn from that Dragonite. Is instead going to be taking a big Dazzling Gleam, but thanks to that Terrestrialization, not going to take too much damage. It's going to fire back here with a Terra Blast into that now Ghost type Talonflame. It does a good chunk of damage as well.
Yeah, I thought that it was a pretty good turn by both sides. I think both players are kind of respectful in that turn, right? Like, Collin's like, okay, I see what you're threatening here. I want the Tailwind enough that I'm going to give you the Terra. You've earned it. But he does still get in a good position there, right? He gets a decent amount of damage out there. He did have to choice lock in order to do that with the choice specs on that Flutter Mane, which is a little bit of a disadvantage, but, not super likely he's going to want to switch moves anyway. However, King Gambit being out is kind of a big deal, right? One nice thing there is that while Talonflame can no longer be hit by Extreme Speed, is being threatened by Sucker Punch here, so if he doesn't want to just quickly give up the Talonflame, he's sort of forced to switch.
Yeah, Flutter Mane actually going to be the Pokemon switching here first for Collin. Collin instead is going to be bringing out his Tyranitar, a Pokemon that would love to set up some sand and maybe try and get a couple of big rock slides off a little bit later, especially if this King Gambit went for something like a fire. But no, Sucker Punch actually ends up failing here, and the Talonflame goes for the Will-O-Wisp. So Sucker Punch wouldn't have hit either of those Pokemon. Talonflame connecting a Will-O-Wisp on stream. First try here for Collin.
Yeah, easy, showing how it's done.
Dragonite, though, goes for that Terra Blast, is going to still target back down into the Tyranitar slot, and that handles that still pretty well here.
So we do get this awkward Tyranitar versus King Gambit matchup, but neither of them ending up being the recipient of their team's Terrestrialization. And not a bad spot for the Talonflame to be in, right? You can't really risk using any attacking moves, but neither of these Pokemon are going to respond super well to being burned. The Dragonite, as is common for that moveset, does have the Lumberry, so not really worth trying to repeatedly burn it. But yeah, I mean, King Gambit can't become that Terrifier because we see the balloons right there, so why not take that easy burn?
Yeah, and I mean, at that point too, right, you're not risking taking something like a Sucker Punch, especially because that Sucker Punch would have probably knocked out either one of the Pokemon on the opposite side of the field, especially because that, the Flutter Mane was choice spec, so it's not like it can protect, it's not like it can status. It's a really comfortable, easy target to Sucker Punch into if you know it's not going to switch, but King Gambit instead is going to be the Pokemon switching out here on Abdullah's side, sending in that Great Tusk. Great Tusk can probably take a little bit more use with this sand, getting that boost to its special defense. Dragonite, though, will be protecting this turn, trying to not take any damage here on the other side. Talonflame going for a taunt, though. Targets down into that Dragonite with the Protect. Definitely makes a lot of sense here to try and stop her from going for some more Protects later on. Tyranitar is going to click Rock Slide into the Protect on that Dragonite. Probably the Pokemon it wanted to hit the most, but will still hit this Great Tusk. And, it's not holding a Focus Sash, but you'll still take any damage you can get.
Yeah, that is technically damage. I think we can all agree. And yeah, I think that the Helidum's a big deal. Like, not only is there not a broken Focus Sash there, but, a Choice Scarf, Great Tusk, you at least have to think about the turn order here.
Yeah, Brave Bird actually going right into the Great Tusk first. It still has that fighting type because it could not Terrasilize, so it takes a ton of damage. Headlong Rush, though, from this Great Tusk into the Tyranitar, definitely enough to get that knockout. Tyranitar was holding the Assault Vest, which helps with your special defense, doesn't help with your physical defense here. Tyranitar will be fainted, get knocked out. This does leave Collin back with just 3 Pokemon in total. This Terra Blast, though, is probably going to turn that into 2 Pokemon thanks to the recoil that this Talonflame already took. And yeah, 7 HP means it's probably not going to hang on from that one.
Yeah, may have actually done even less damage than that Rock Slide did to Great Tusk, but the last 7 matters a lot more than the first 7.
That's a really positive way to look at that. Dragonite will take a little bit of Sandstorm Chip here. Still not under half, though, and Tailwind ends probably at the least opportune time for Collin.
Yeah, I mean, we do really see the value of that Choice Scarf there, where, a traditional item on the Great Tusk there would have caused it to move after the Tyranitar. I mean, it wasn't likely to be super devastating there, but at the very least, saving a whole bunch of Dragonite's hit points.
Yeah, Flutter Mane and Great Tusk switching out here. All of these Paradox Pokemon. If only Dragonite could switch out for Torkoal, then maybe Collin would feel a little bit more comfortable. But you still now, Great Tusk is probably not in a great spot. It has Headlong Rush, Earthquake, Close Combat, but it is running Rock Slide, so you could lock yourself in the Rock Slide. Headlong Rush into Flutter Mane, though, from Abdullah's is easily enough to get that knockout. You take another defense and special defense drop. When there's a Rock Slide, there's a way, but you have to understand that Collin is currently 1 Pokemon against 4 on Abdullah's side and is going to go for the Headlong Rush. Rush, and I think at that point you have locked yourself into Headlong Rush.
Yeah. Obviously, the problem with that lock is you're going to have a really difficult time hitting that third Dragonite. It is retained its flying typing, but perhaps Dragonite's going to do its best to make that not matter either way.
Yeah, Terra Blast into the Great Tusk, super effective, is enough for that knockout. I mean, I'm sure at that point, too, maybe Collin was just trying to get a little bit of speed information between one Great Tusk to another without the Tailwind, and, you know, maybe just paying attention to how much damage that Headlong Rush was doing. So there is still some information to be gained there, and I definitely can see why you would have chosen that versus something like the Rock Slide.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, Rock Slide is not going to win that game, right?
It could.
It could. I think it is possible. I do think the information is more valuable, though, right?
Yes, I agree.
With a very low percentage chance to, like, maybe get one that you're gonna get a lot of mentions in your Twitter that you're not hugely excited about. At least figure some things out for the next game. That does make it trickier, though, right? I mean, it's only Collin knows if right now if that was a speed tie or not. Certainly possible, but assuming that it wasn't, that's not a great interaction for him. He doesn't have many Pokemon in his team. They're going to take attacks from that opposing Great Tusk super well. So knowing that, if he gets it low, he can't rely on his own Great Tusk to finish it off necessarily. At least before, eating another decisive blow is going to make this game plan a little bit trickier.
I think that Collin wants to bring Iron Bundle. I think Iron Bundle feels really good, but then does Abdullah then say, okay, I didn't bring Lilligant Torkoal, do I now bring that as my counter for game 2? And I could see both of those scenarios happening right now if Abdullah tries to counterplay for the Iron Bundle coming, because the fact that it didn't come last game meant that you were still struggling with your speed tiers even through Tailwind, because Tyranitar and Tailwind was still not fast enough.
Yeah, I kind of love that game 1 for that reason, right?
Yes.
Where it's like, it's another team where, you have a classic combination on it that kind of, focuses, your eyes can't help be drawn to it during team preview, right? From like a meta strategy standpoint, I like having in the first 2 slots there, right? It's like,
yeah.
I want you to think about this. However, it doesn't have to bring that, right? It's not what he does in that game, and now Collin has to be prepared for what he saw in game 1, the potential of that lead, and he's got to win 2 in a row now.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, right, you have to take the time to think from your game 1 of how you could have played better, but now you're also on the back foot because your adjustments may feel more obvious to your opponent who already has 1 game up on you. Dragonite and Great Tusk, once again, the lead here for Abdullah, where it is Iron Bundle and Fluttermane, 2 of the fastest Pokemon, 2 of the highest usage stats in the format.
Yeah, trying to show why they're so popular. Neither of the Pokemon on the other side of the field going to super like getting blasted away on by special attacks. So there's a much better lead this time for Collin, I think. We didn't mention it in the previous game, but there is the multi-scale ability on that Dragonite. So whatever the first attack is to hit it here isn't going to do huge damage. But just some extra incentive, perhaps, to use some spread moves. Yeah,
I mean, this could be a great time for that Iron Bundle to go for a Terra Ghost, but the Great Tusk on Abdullah's side of the field is not Terra Ground like you oftentimes see. It is currently Terra Steel, and Terra Steel is going to be a really nice way to deal with a lot of the pressure on Collin's side of the field, especially from both of these 2 Pokemon.
Yeah. And let's remember the item, too, right? There's not the Focus Sash there that we
Yes.
normally see. So keep that in mind when you're viewing the speed tiers, right? That large tusked creature is probably going to move before Fluttermane.
King Gambit going to switch out for Dragonite. Dragonite definitely does not want to take any sort of Ice-type move, whether it is Terrastalized or not. Looks like Collin is going to Terrastalize right out of the gate, though, on turn 1 into that. Actually, no, sorry, that's Abdullah is actually Terrastalizing the Great Tusk here into that Terra Steel type, which is going to help especially against some of that super effective damage that could come out from the Fluttermane or from that Iron Bundle later, especially. But Iron Bundle's Freeze Dry going into the King Gambit turn in this first turn here is going to actually get the freeze this turn. Oh my goodness, I had a bit of a feeling that definitely makes Abdullah's game a little bit harder. Taking a Headlong Rush, though, into the Fluttermane is enough for that knockout. Does have the defense and special defense drops right now, and I think, you're still not too upset about that freeze.
Yeah, I mean...
You're upset, but you're not like, it could be worse.
Yeah, I mean, I've never been a freeze I was excited to receive, but yeah, I mean, King Gambit to an extent does a job there, right? It protects Dragonite. The point of getting it out in the field was likely not to build a bunch of offensive momentum. So much it was just to, ensure that Dragonite's multi-scale is intact for later. It does really hurt this current board position, though, right? So you're very unlikely to immediately unthaw. So now these 2 Pokemon can kind of at least a little bit try to focus away at the Great Tusk. we saw that despite the choice scarf, that Iron Bundle is moving in a hurry, and this Great Tusk is also moving in a hurry, getting off the field.
Yeah, Great Tusk switching in for the Dragonite here, and yeah, that Iron Bundle's moving fast. It's the one with the booster energy, right? So it is going to be probably the speediest thing for a while. Looks like, though, Collin finally going to Terrastalize as well. Actually matching Great Tusk for Great Tusk, but this one is going to be Terra Ground, and this is probably Collin's best way to fight through the Great Tusk on the opposite side of the field, just having to hope that you're either faster or can handle it. But Freeze Drive from the Iron Bundle into the King Gambit once again, just doing little bits of chip damage here. Great Tusk goes for a headlong rush into what was that Great Tusk, but is now the Dragonite. King Gambit stays frozen for this turn. You know, it is instead of giving presents like old Delibird did, now it just hands out freezes for gifts.
Yeah, I mean, I like to feel like, the Hydro Pump variant at least gives out presents about 20% of the time by losing the game when it misses. But really great switch there. Collin predicting Dragonite to come in, but getting the slot wrong.
Yeah, you can see how important that multi-scale is, because even taking that Freeze Dry does a ton of damage onto that Dragonite. Headlong Rush into King Gambit's enough for that knockout, and I think you're definitely feeling the effects now of not having that King Gambit be able to do any damage this turn, especially for Abdullah because of that freeze on the last turn.
Still, though, the Dragonite's getting a free attack this time, and it's an Ice Spinner.
Yeah, Ice Spinner into the Great Tusk does actually do a really good chunk of damage. Once again, this Pokemon is not actually holding that Focus Sash. It is still Choice Scarfed.
You do get to see its fantastic stats playing it out, though. It's super effective attack, and it's able to take it pretty well.
Yeah, and I mean, it was also at that minus. It was at a one drop there, especially from that former Headlong Rush. But now is, I think, where things get a little bit more frustrating if you're Collin, if your Great Tusk is slower.
Yeah, I mean, we did see that before. I mean, the option there would be, perhaps we'll see an Icy Wind this time to try and flip the turn order between the two Great Tusks.
Yeah, extreme speed from the Dragonite doesn't matter, if you have priority, and that is enough to get the knockout on that Great Tusk, which makes Abdullah's Great Tusk on his side far more difficult to deal with, especially for whatever is remaining in the back for Collin. Iron Bundle just click an Icy Wind here. It does still make that move look pretty dangerous when it goes into a Dragonite, and we'll get that knockout. We'll at least slow down this Great Tusk a little bit here.
It gets it back down to normal speed, but without its own Great Tusk to fire back, this is going to hurt a lot.
Close combat into that Iron Bundle, definitely enough for that knockout here. Is going to, you drop the defense and special defense, but Collin has to have something in the back that can handle this full HP Great Tusk, a King Gambit, and something else that we haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that's a tough one. When you see the Trainer Truck coming out here, not going to love close combat.
It's not gonna love it. I think even at that point, right? The Flutter Mane coming out here too. This is probably looking a little bit tougher. Sandstream doesn't help you. You're not taking any chip damage. So I think at this point, Collin definitely understands that this matchup is no longer in his favor and is probably gonna have to call it curtains there.
Yeah, I thought that was a very impressive set, right? Where we don't really see the Torkoal thing at all. Actually, literally don't see it at all.
Yeah.
It's entirely the other four Pokemon of a team playing together. And I think that you really see kind of both really impressive play, but also a really impressive team there, right? Where, I mean, you've got to be able to do that when you do have that sort of duo on your team that players are prepared for, where if you just play predictably, you don't have a chance against players at this skill level. But it was kind of a clever way to play the set, probably not what Collin's expecting him to do, and really showing off how strong of a player he is.
Abdullah not bringing Lilligant Torkoal was probably, it was such a smart move, because if you're Collin, you're probably thinking, I'll see Lilligant Torkoal, I'll prep for that game one, and then you already have a game up, kind of before it starts, right? If you can nail that, and that's one of the give or take aspects of running teams that have a core to them, Annihilate, Mousehold, Lillicole is one, even Talonflame, Great Tusk. You oftentimes see those Pokemon in those pairs, and you're like, okay, well, that's just going to be the lead, turn one. That's the easy lead. I already know what this thing's going to do. And by hard prepping for it game one and then not seeing it, you're already on the back foot. And then the trainer can adjust to it the next game if they want to, but they also could just not do it. So it shows why best of threes are just such an interesting way to play Pokemon, because now you have so many mind games just between two sets.
Yeah, I will be curious to see too. Do you hear from the players just how familiar they were with that matchup? Because I don't know if that was rock, paper, scissors, or if both sides kind of knew that the Lillicole route was wrong,
right?
Because neither of them really switched up their strategy too much, but it was just decisive both times.
Yeah, I mean, the Iron Bundle was the big change, but even still, Iron Bundle was not able to outspeed and outmatch the Pokemon that it needed to, and I think that is truly because of that Great Tusk that Abdullah is running. That Terra Steel is just absolutely massive into that matchup. I mean, you still don't want to take damage from any opposing Great Tusk, but for Abdullah, it was get rid of the opposing Great Tusk, and then you're pretty much golden.
Yeah, I really liked the Iron Bundle adjustment because he was just that close, right? You know, if Great Tusk survives that extreme speed, which I assume was pretty close.
Yeah, probably.
I mean, that just, if you pick up a knockout the other direction, we're talking about how clever Collin is and how, we're excited to see how he does in Game 3, right? It's just not quite what happens. But yeah, it was interesting to me to not see Lilycole at all, right? Where I assume both players have practiced that matchup pretty significantly. Because at very least, the Torkoal excluded in Collin's team, right? Like, it's a team you have to be prepared for, right?
Yeah.
We've seen how well they've done with it, and I mean, the way that played out is fascinating to me. It's a little different than what I was expecting.
Yeah, I definitely probably did not come into this matchup looking into that, right? Because when you think of that team, I still think of the way that Nick Navarre had played it just a couple of weeks ago, and just kind of the way that Lilligant Torkoal is just so commonly run. You're still, after you Eruption is just, it's something that will probably be buried in my head for the rest of my life. Like, I'll probably never forget it. I'll forget someone's name from, some important event, but I'll still remember After You Eruption, just buried in there. But, we ended up not even seeing that. I think Abdullah played this game really well, and I wonder how much practice he has with that team versus, this is one of those ones where I really wish I could get inside both of the players' heads and ask them the questions, like the same questions to each other, like how much have you prepped this matchup? What is, why did you pick Terra Steel on Great Tusk as opposed to Terra Ground? Like where were your inspirations? And it's one of those ones where this game could have gone a couple of different ways in just a few turns.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a pretty impressive looking 0-2 on Collin's side, where I don't think he did anything super wrong. And sometimes we'll see players they'll get nervous on stream or whatever. Like, everybody's got bad games. I don't think he played poorly. I think especially Game 2, he had the right plan. It just didn't quite work. Actually, I think the flex is pretty good at Abdullah's side too, right? Where it's one of those things that certain players hate, Lilycole. Oh, you won with Lilycole, that doesn't count. But he didn't, prove that he could. He won a very conventional game, not even using kind of the less popular Pokemon on that team.
He's 6-0 and none of it counted.
Yeah. I think we've all read that in chat before. Maybe that's in chat right now. I don't know.
Maybe.
But it's always interesting to hear the reasons that players come up with for why other people's wins don't matter. And I think that for me, the records is what matters. If you want to know if a win counted or not, you check the standings. But it's got to feel good to win on stream like that, right?
It has to feel good. And you know what? We'll be able to find out and ask our winner here, Abdullah. If you want to take it away, Gabby, go for it.
Thank you so much. I'm here with Abdullah, who first ever event. I believe you said that you thought you would go 1-8, but regardless of what happens now, you will not go 1-8. So congratulations. How's it feel?
It feels so good. It feels so good. I have no words. It just feels so good.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of the dream that everybody has when they imagine coming to these kind of events. So
I think the times I've daydreamed about this exact scenario where I'm going undefeated as a new player and getting to talk, it's probably hundreds of times.
All right.
Exactly review in my head.
So what else happens in this daydream? Let's just start checking off some bucket list items.
I think everything at this point, everything. My only dream was to make day 2 at this point. I didn't. It's crazy what happens. Life comes at you, right? Initially, I was like, if I get 1 win, I'll be happy. And then I said, if I go even, I'll be happy.
Yeah.
And now I'm saying, if I make day 2, I'll be happy. And now I'm thinking, if I top go, I'll be happy. I'm just so happy.
Yeah, I feel it. I feel it. So, I mean, let's talk about the team. Let's talk about your experience playing VGC. You said that you've been playing for about 10 months or so?
Yeah. So, I'm newer, and I love offensive teams. I just love clicking buttons.
That's fair.
That's exactly what the team does. It's a team made by Nails, Nick Navarre, I believe. I basically ripped the paste off him. I sort of changed 1 Terra type. I've changed 2 EVs. I've changed 1 singular move. And it's just, honestly, I think it's one of the best teams in the format. Sun teams, they're just so good. But this matchup in specific is one of my nightmares.
Really?
Yeah. I was really praying that I never went against it, and I've played 2 now, and I've beat both, I guess.
All right, so when you played it the first time around, did you learn any strategies that you then brought into your next matchup? Or
No, not really.
No?
It's the same. It's that's the only thing you can abuse, right? And I shouldn't be saying this, but it's a very linear path you have to follow to beat this specific team. I feel like that turn 1 on the first game demonstrates how this is supposed to work, throwing extreme speed into rock slide. Anyone knows that's coming, right? But it's how much can you risk? And getting that Terra type turn 1 and then not even going for that is just, you're so ahead, right?
Yeah.
Even if it's a bad matchup, now I'm like, now that Tyranitar can't Terra, the Great Tusk can't Terra, it's much easier. So I've been practicing a lot with my friends, so both games have gone exactly how it's gone in practice.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome. And are your friends also newer to VGC? Are they
No,
more veteran players?
It's funny, like, when you compare me to my friends, I swear some of them have like it's like a dozen world cuts compared to them, and then it's me, first regional, right? And that's why I love my friends, right? I get to talk to some of the best players on the planet, and yet I'm here on my first regional, and they treat me the same, and that's what I love my friends, right? I'm talking to people who have won regionals, who've cut regionals, a dozen worlds cuts is kind of exaggerating, but they're definitely up there, and then I'm here like new, so the amount I learn from them is like, it's insane how much I learn from them. So
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I love about Pokemon personally, is that you can be playing for years upon years, or you can be new to the game, but you can still have like a valid interpretation and a valid like approach to the game.
Exactly.
It's sort of like once you know your basics, right? Like once you know your type matchups, once you know like, okay, this is the team, this is how it functions, everybody's kind of at the same level. And that's really cool to sort of see this in action as well. And I guess, have you gotten any advice in particular that from your friends that have really helped you through today?
I guess the specific advice, and that helped me like a ton in this matchup, is like, it's not about who's on the screen or who you're playing, it's about the Pokemon on the screen, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, Collin, he doesn't know who I am, and yet I could name all the teams he's played in every regional. So I know who he is, and when I first heard that I was matched up against him and then going on stream, I was like, my stomach sank, right? And then looking at the matchup, I felt even worse, right? But then I just remember what my friend said, and it's like, it's true. It's not about who's on the screen, it's Pokemon on the screen.
Yeah. So tell me more about Lilligant Torkoal. Have you played that mode at all throughout the day?
Yeah, I've played it less than I thought I would play it, but it's definitely come out. And I feel like it's a very, very strong mode because you punish teams that are built poorly, right? And that's exactly what Nail said when he built a team, right?
Yeah.
I shouldn't say poorly, it's just teams without a Torkoal Lilligant matchup, they just crumble, right? And that's a lot of teams in this meta. And so that's why I feel very comfortable playing it, because I know that odds are I'm gonna roll a good matchup and I'm gonna play someone who doesn't have a matchup in Athletico. And so even though I haven't played it much, I like having it as an option, right? And everyone has to fear that, and everyone has to play around that, and then I just don't even bring it. So it's a strong team.
Yeah, for sure. And I kind of want to go back to something that you sort of alluded to earlier. New player, you have amazing friends, but what originally like brought you into VGC and made you say like, I don't care, yes, there are other games out there, but I want to be a competitive Pokemon player?
I guess, in specific, I watched like the best of the best play. I watched Cybertron play, I watched Summer Cybertron, I watched Wolf play, I watched Joey X9 play, and it's like, at the very beginning, I had no clue why they made the moves they made, right? I had just understood the basics, and I was like questioning every move they'd make, and yet when I saw the turn go out, they get the turn perfect, right? And I was like, how can I be like that? I just want to be one day at the level of Cybertron or one day at the level of Wolf, and until I get there, I won't stop playing.
All right, well, every journey starts with a single step, and of course, it always helps when you have some friends supporting you.
Yeah,
Is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to at home?
My family first, my parents, my two little sisters. I want to give them, of course, but for my friends, I really want to shout out Gio, Polar Bear. He's basically the reason I got on stream, I believe. He's helped me with so many matchups. He's just such a strong player, and he's the player that, like, you get better, but he's always one step ahead of you. And so I really want to give a shout out to him, to Yotam, Violet. One of the reasons I got into VGC and I stuck with it is because of my brother Mike. He's just such an awesome person. He's been to Worlds and stuff like that, and yet I was 2 or 3 months into the game, and he treated me like I was at his level, right? I learned something from him every day, and he he's the reason I'm here. So I want to shout out him. I want to shout out my MPA team. I want to shout out Kyoto King Gambits. I'm missing someone, but I feel like I have so many friends. I want to shout out Growlu and Clown Dog. I feel like I'll leave it at that, because I'll keep on going if I...
Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll have an opportunity to shout out everybody else in the future as well, because I think that you've had such a strong start here today that regardless of how the rest of the day goes, I think you know, going 6-0, especially in a field like this, like that's something to be proud of. You know, don't sell yourself short.
Yeah.
Take the momentum, move forwards, and you know, best of luck. It's
Thank you.
so awesome to have you back here for an interview.
Thank you.